All right, Mr. Latrell, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, this is cause number FM21-00065, application for protective order, applicant Robert Litrell versus respondent Daniel Crowe. And Mr. Latrell, I'm going to go ahead and have you raise your right hand. Mr. Haslam, is Mr. Crowe going to testify today? Are you going to call Mr. Crowe? And you're on mute. You'll need to unmute again.
He is, Your Honor.
All right, and well, I'll tell you what, Mr. Latrell, put your hand down. And you also anticipated the testimony of Miss Brittany Latrell, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, I'm going to bring Miss Latrell in. I'll swear all of you at the same time. Are these the only individuals we expect to testify?
They are.
Okay. Let's give Miss Latrell just a moment.
Yes, go ahead. You're supposed to join. The judge has invited you to join now.
Dial in.
We're working, Your Honor.
That's fine.
There's a question that pops up about how to make the audio work, and that's a little confusing. There's some choices that people don't instinctively know the answer to.
Oh, I see. All right, Miss Latrell, can you see and hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, all right. At this time, I'm going to place each of you under oath. If you'll all raise your right hands, Mr. Latrell, Miss Latrell, and Mr. Crowe. And let me see, I need to bring, just keep your hands raised right there. Mr. Crowe back to the.
He's here.
All right, I'm bringing him back into the main session.
There we go.
Raise your right hand, Mr. Crowe. All right. Do each of you swear that the testimony you give to the court today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Ms. Latrell?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Latrell?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes.
And Mr. Crowe?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may put your hands down. All right, I see a bit of my own in the background. If anybody's running YouTube or anything like that, you must close it. Otherwise,
It shows on my screen. It's live on YouTube right now.
Well, that's correct. I am streaming it live.
Mine also says live on YouTube.
Ms. Latrell, I'm going to move you to a breakout room.
Okay.
And it may be that if all Mr. Haslam, Mr. Latrell, Mr. Crowe, you're all appearing in the same place, you're creating a feedback loop.
In the same room.
So my client's moving to a room across the hall. Moving to a room across the hall.
Okay, that's what's going on. Just as it comes out of the speakers, it goes into someone else's microphone and it just creates.
Testing. Do we still have the feedback?
No, that's better.
I don't have it on mine.
Okay. All right, Mr. Latrell, I've placed you under oath, and are you going to call yourself as a witness today?
Yes, sir, I am.
All right, you may proceed.
All right, Your Honor. I'm gonna go ahead and start from the very beginning. You know, as I told Mr. Haslam, I had my kids on the weekend of February the 6th, and my daughter had told me that Miss Latrell had been pregnant by Mr. Crowe. And, you know, my kids have went through a rough divorce. They've had to uproot from their home and be placed in a much smaller home. And so I simply had asked Miss Latrell through a text message, do you think that y'all having a child is a good idea right now? And she proceeded to hit me with a barrage of text messages, the very last one being, and she stated, I quote, "You have done pissed Daniel off. Good luck." And this was on February the 6th. Okay. After that, you know, I see my kids every 2 weeks. So I hadn't spoke to her up until the point of February the 18th. which I spoke with
There's
her
an
by
objection.
telephone.
All right, so let me go ahead and advise. If there's an objection lodged during your testimony, just stop giving your testimony and let the court address the objection. What's
I
your
understand.
objection, Mr. Haslam?
Hearsay, Your Honor.
All right, the court's going to sustain the objection.
Okay.
Mr. Latrell, you can't testify to anything that someone told you
Even if I,
outside of court unless you bring that person to testify, unless it is a party opponent such as Mr. Crowe.
okay. And other than if I have physical evidence through text messaging or verbal recordings of phone calls.
Well, if you have that, it has to be offered into evidence to the court. So
Okay. At this time or
at this
do I
time,
have-
yes.
Okay. Yeah. See, there's where I'm on the phone that all my evidence is on. So
All that would have to be submitted to the court in this, at least in this situation.
okay. Well, then we'll
Prior to the
wipe
hearing.
that we'll strike that from everything, and then we'll just go to what happened. Okay. On February the 19th, I went to pick up my children, and I was told to pick my kids up at 5, and I usually pick them up at 6. And when I usually pick my kids up, they're always there by themselves.
Foundation.
Overruled. Go ahead, Mr. Latrell.
Okay. So when I went to pick my children up on the 19th, I was told to be there at 5 p.m. instead of 6, my normal time of 6 p.m. And
Same objection.
Overruled.
okay. So when I got there at 5 p.m. as I was told by my ex-wife. And whenever I got
Objection.
there, Mr. Crowe,
And what's your objection?
Foundation hearsay. I was told by my wife.
Do you think he's offering that to prove the matter asserted that Mr. Crowe?
Well, it's
violence?
unclear unless he explains to the court the purpose for which he's offering that statement. I can only object to preserve the error.
I understand. Overruled. Go ahead, Mr. Latrell.
okay, so I arrived at 5 p.m. and per my request of my ex-wife. And when I did, Mr. Crowe proceeded to come outside of the house.
I failed to preserve the error.
I've entertained your objection. I've overruled it. I think you've preserved it. Go ahead, Mr. Latrell.
Okay, when I arrived at 5 p.m., Mr. Crowe proceeded to come out of the house. He opened my door of my pickup truck. And when he opened my door of my pickup truck, he said, what goes on in my house doesn't need to be said in my house. So what did you say? And I told him exactly what was said. Did y'all think it was a good idea to have a child? Well, then he proceeded to curse at me, tell me, excuse my language, Your Honor, but don't worry about what the F goes on in my house. I'm tired of you threatening me. And it'll probably get objected again. But I proceeded to show him, that I haven't talked any way bad about him. The day before, I even said I had no problem with him per the recording. And as soon as I turned to grab my phone off my center console, that's when Mr. Crowe grabbed me around my neck and pushed me over my center console and was holding me down. And he proceeded to choke me until my daughter came out screaming. I mean, basically, that's all I have, Your Honor, unless, I can have more time to place all my recordings. And, I didn't know how this all works because I've never done this before. But I also know that, Mr. Crowe has had a PPO placed on him before in a different state and also in that county as Van Zant. I was failed to be provided with the EPO from Wills Point, the police department, which from my understanding, I should have been provided. That's why we're here today, Your Honor. I'm simply asking you to give me something to protect myself due to the fact of he has put that address down on his arrest record. When he was arrested, he put her address down. And per my divorce decree, I'm supposed to pick my kids up from her address every 2 weeks, the first, the third, and the fifth Friday of every month, the weekend of every month. And so, I've never spoke 6 words to Mr. Crowe other than introduce myself. And then when this event happened, we've never spoke. And if it takes me asking a simple question to provoke this man and knowing that he's had, violent outbursts in the past with, PPOs being placed or filed on him in the past, I don't know what's next. He stated to me whenever he was released from jail that through a text. This probably get objected to, but through a text message where he basically bribed me and asked me to drop the charges, and I never responded to him. So, I don't know what's next. He went on to tell me he's going to lose his job, he's going to lose his kids because he's in an active divorce, and I never responded to him. So I don't know what's next. When a man loses everything, they're capable of a lot of things. So I've had to install cameras all around my house to make my fiance feel safe, outside and in. I don't know what's next.
Is that all, Mr. Latrell?
Yes, sir. That's all.
Now, I want to comment on your mention of additional evidence. So that evidence would have to have been filed with the court, provided to Mr. Haslam ahead of time. So it's not that the court will not or would not entertain it. It just has to be done prior to, and the court would have to have that. It's not one of these things I can allow you to talk about it without seeing it, or allow Mr. Haslam to see it. Okay.
Understood.
All right. So, Mr. Haslam, so Mr. Latrell said that's all the testimony that he has calling himself. I'm going to take that as meaning that he's going to pass himself for questioning to you.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I inquire?
Yes.
Mr. Litrell, good morning. I have a few questions to ask you. First of all, I want to ask you real briefly about the breakout session that you and I had about 15, 20 minutes ago, where you and I talked just to each other off the record outside the presence of the judge. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir, I do.
Just want to ask you if you have any feelings or sensation, any concern that I tried to coerce you in any way during that conversation into changing your mind, changing your testimony, or any other way?
No, sir. I think I was pretty adamant with you on what I wanted and what I needed out of this today.
And you did not find me to be dishonest or to try to pressure you in any way?
No, sir. You simply asked me about my statement here on line 1 on my declaration. I told you because you had asked me because it's very short, lines to put my whole story on. You had asked for the full story, and I gave it to you.
Okay. So, sir, what is your phone number?
My phone number is 214.
Hang on, Mr. Latrell.
Yes,
and Mr. Haslam, we can get that information. However, we are streaming this on YouTube, so I would rather not provide that personal information.
Very well. Very well. I respect that. Yes, I respect that decision. Sir, have you had the same phone number at all times in the last year?
Oh, yes, sir. I've had the same phone number since I was 18 years old.
And how old are you now?
I'm 32.
And the cell phone service provider, has that always been the same cell phone service provider?
I believe I switched to Sprint, but it's still the same phone number. I believe I switched probably almost a year ago.
Okay. Sprint and T-Mobile are the same.
They merged. Yeah, they merged.
So Sprint and T-Mobile have a phone service provider at all times for?
No, well, Straight Talk is a separate service provider. They run under Verizon.
So who is your cell phone service provider for the last year?
For the last year, it's been Sprint.
Okay. And sir, I don't have an address for you. Do you agree?
Come again? You broke up there a little bit.
I understand. You agree that you did not provide an email address to the court or report one in your application for protective order?
Does it ask for one there? I don't believe it asks for an email address, sir.
I agree with you. I'm just asking you to confirm you did not provide one to the court or to me. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. All right. Sir, you have several children. Are your children trustworthy?
All right. So, Mr. Haslam.
Your Honor, can you hear them? I can't hear them, Your Honor.
So, Mr. Haslam, you're breaking up periodically. So we didn't get I think you were asking if he had several children.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think if I go more slowly, that helps the feedback. Mr. Latrell, how many children do you have?
I have two children with Miss Latrell, period. Now that's all I have is two legal children that I have rights to.
And one of those is Peyton Litrell.
Yes, sir.
How old is she?
She is she is 7.
Okay. And who is the other child that you have with Miss Latrell?
It's Braden Litrell.
Okay. And how old is he?
He just turned 13.
Now, there are two more children Miss Latrell has that one of whom is Mackenzie. Agreed?
Correct. Correct. Yes, sir.
And what's the name of the fourth child?
Kaylee Latrell.
Okay. And how old is Kaylee?
She just turned 16 December.
Thank you, sir. And Mackenzie is 14?
She'll be 50. Yes, sir. 14. She'll be 15 the 17th of April. I'm sorry.
Now, thank you, sir. Your children, are they trustworthy?
To a point. My youngest daughter, she can be swayed by Miss Latrell pretty easily.
So tell me about that.
Up until Miss Latrell can. I can be honest with you. When my kids are here, they say and tell me everything. They're not afraid to tell me what their feelings are. But when it comes to Miss Latrell, they're afraid of what's going to happen, what the retribution of it is, and they're afraid to be yelled at. So I believe that Peyton will go to the point of saying what Miss Latrell wants her to say, so she'll quit yelling at her and quit badgering her.
Are you aware of specific instances where Peyton has been untrustworthy in that regard?
Yeah, I had CPS at my house the other day. I am aware.
Yeah. So CPS has been to your house recently to inquire several allegations that your 4 children have made about your abuse of them, correct?
Incorrect. I had CPS here and they only made one allegation of something that Peyton had said, that something about burning some clothes. No, they only mentioned Peyton.
You're aware that all 4 of your children recently had forensic interviews with a forensic interviewer at CPS?
Not up until the point of a CPS worker coming and knock on my door. And therefore, at that time of Friday, this would have been last Friday, they had already closed the case on Thursday. So I had not spoken with anybody up until that
Okay,
point.
so it's your testimony. Yes, sir. Thank you. It's your testimony today that CPS has told you that they've closed any case that they had against you. Is that right?
Yes, sir. And I've been prompted by the Smith County CPS office to ask for a review because I wasn't spoken to, and Miss Latrell had gave a false phone number to the CPS worker, and I've had the same phone number for a long time.
Okay. All right. So the allegation that you're aware of that Peyton, your youngest child, who's 7, made about you is that you were burning some clothes.
Can I object real quick? I don't have no problem answering any of those questions, but can I ask what that is relevant to this case today?
Well, so Mr. Latrell, you can object because he's the one asking the questions of you. I guess you could object. However, I'm going to let Mr. Haslam ask these questions, and the court will determine when I review your testimony if I believe if it's relevant or not. Okay.
Okay. I appreciate it.
Go ahead, Mr. Haslam.
So the allegation that you're claiming that Peyton made that is untrue has to do with burning clothes.
Correct. That's the only thing CPS brought to my attention.
I see. Are you unaware of allegations that the children made about your drug use?
Yeah, I'm completely unaware.
So let's talk about that.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I want you to finish your answer completely.
Oh,
please.
yeah. No, she had said that Miss Latrell had allegations of cocaine and marijuana use in my home. And when the CPS worker walked around my home, checked every closet, she found no evidence. She kind of laughed it off and felt like it was a waste of her time being here.
I see. So you are unaware that your children made those allegations?
Yeah, I'm unaware that those are from my children.
So when's the last time you used illicit controlled substances, Mr. Latrell?
Oh, it's been, shoot, I would say over a year when I was with Miss Latrell. Miss Latrell
Okay.
used with me.
The
We
last
smoked
time,
marijuana.
yes. Okay. What about cocaine, Mr. Litrell?
Oh, no, I haven't done cocaine since I was experimentally and since I was maybe 17, 16.
And alcohol. Sir, isn't it true on October the 8th of 2020, you were bringing Peyton home to her home at Miss Latrell's house in Wills Point from your home in Tyler, and were drunk, driving, swerving all over the road with Peyton in the car?
No, that's untrue.
Isn't it also true that on?
Go ahead.
Go.
What I'm trying to ask is, if this was a problem in October of any issue that was in October, my kids would not have been here for Thanksgiving and every weekend up until that point. They would not have been here Christmas and every weekend up until that point. They would not have been here every weekend up until the point of the time of Daniel assaulting me.
Thank
now
you for
I'm being
that.
held from my children.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that. So October the 8th is Peyton's birthday, right?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Peyton was at your house in Tyler for her birthday. You came and picked her up from Wills Point, took her to Tyler.
Correct.
And then you immediately brought her back to Wills Point because you got into a disagreement with your current girlfriend, Ariel, correct?
Correct. I would say maybe 4 or 5 hours after I picked her up. Correct.
Right. And do you now dispute that you were drinking while you were driving?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Do you believe Miss Latrell would allow that?
All right, gentlemen. So my court report.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry.
Hang on. So my court reporter has a very difficult time taking down a clear transcript of who is saying what. And Zoom complicates that. You know, if we were in the courtroom, you may be able to tell when someone's through talking or they're not. So I know that the Zoom complicates it somewhat. So what I need you to do is maybe pause for a moment or, maybe a second or two to allow a response from whoever you're speaking to, and to give that person a amount of time so they know that you're finished speaking, and just do our very best not to talk over one another. Okay? Yes, sir, Mr. Haslam.
Thank you. And I'm moving the other tablet downstairs now. I understand that contributes to feedback.
Yes, sir, it most likely does. And I had muted Mr. Crowe, and it improved it significantly, so that moving it may also help. Okay.
Mr. Latrell, on the night of October the 8th, isn't it true that you went into a drunken rage and fury and not only endangered Peyton when you were driving her to and from your home in Tyler, but you completely destroyed the contents of your present girlfriend Ariel's home?
No, I didn't go into to driving her drunk home, for one. I did break a couple of fans, but nobody was here. I was here by myself. I broke my own things. And as far as I know, it's not against the law to break your own stuff.
I see. So did you do that sober or drunk?
I might have had a few drinks that night, but while I was here by myself.
Okay. Now, after you were there at your girlfriend Ariel's home and broke those things in her home, this was the night that you had Peyton and you had driven her from Wills Point to Tyler and back to Wills Point, correct?
Correct. Not intoxicated. Correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And just for the record, that woman's name is Ariel, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what's her last name?
Shackle.
Please spell that.
SCHAKEL.
So, sir, why did you do that? Why were you breaking things and destroying property in her home?
I was going through a lot of things with Miss Latrell at the time. You know, we have gone through a rough divorce. You know, money was involved. You know, it just one of those things that me and her had some personal issues going on, and while I was here by myself, nobody around, I got a little upset being alone, and I did break a couple fans and some other things that I had bought, like a TV. But nobody was here in the home. I was here by myself.
Okay. Mhm. So just so I'm sure that I understand your testimony about this, you, on your daughter's birthday, Peyton, you had her in the car with you from Wills Point to Tyler and from Tyler back to Wills Point. On that night, you were angry at Mrs. Latrell, Mrs. Brittany Latrell, and that anger caused you to destroy some property in Miss Sheckle's home. Do I have that right?
Partly, and like I stated before, me and Miss Sheckle had a couple issues that that weren't any concern of Miss Latrell or Peyton. It was just something in between us. And when I took Peyton home, I come home and I had a few drinks, and then I did break a couple fans, and that's what I'm saying here today, is that if we were going through a divorce, my divorce was not finalized until December the 7th, and we were going through the divorce. If Miss Latrell had a problem or any issue with that incident, my kids would not have been at my home every weekend up until that point. Thanksgiving, Christmas, it should have been an issue brought up then.
So this anger that you exhibited that night, that's been an issue for you for quite some time. In fact, in 2010, you pled guilty to assaulting Mrs. Latrell, Brittany Latrell, your ex-wife. You pled guilty to assaulting her and choking her, didn't you?
I believe was it guilty? I don't know if it was. Yeah, I believe it was guilty.
In fact, in that matter, you were initially charged with felony domestic strangulation, and then you pleaded down to a Class A felony assault causes bodily injury, right?
It wasn't a felony. It was a Class A misdemeanor, assault causing bodily injury, not a felony. And
you pled to 2 years community service with about 40 hours of community service and 2 years of probation.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Just to be clear, in that matter, you assaulted Mrs. Latrell and choked her.
Correct. After some things were done and she hit me. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I didn't know she had called the police on me until I got a letter in the mail.
Yes.
So I didn't get to file charges on her for the things she did to me.
I see.
I had no marks, no.
All right. Now, I want to move forward from 2010, forward from October the 8th in 2020 to the night of February the 7th of 2021. Do you recall that night?
No, sir. This has been after the 6th of the message I got from Mr. Trail. You pissed Daniel off. Good luck.
Okay. So let's talk about that, sir. Isn't it true that Daniel offered to come and pick up your children that were visiting you in Tyler and save you a trip from returning them to Wills Point?
I do remember this, yes, sir. But that was also after Miss Latrell. I'd asked Miss Latrell if she thought it was a good idea that they were having a child, and she stated to me, "Now you can drive them all the way to Wills Point."
Yeah. So you agree with me that Daniel offered to pick them up and take them to Wills Point to save you a trip? Yes.
Through Miss Latrell, I believe. Yes. She never spoke to me about it.
Okay. And so you agree that after this discussion that you had with Miss Latrell, where you challenged her and her decision about the pregnancy, Daniel did not pick the children up. Agreed?
Correct. Yes. She stated I can take them all the way to Wills Point myself.
And you did that, right?
Correct. Yes, sir.
How many children did you take home that night that way to Wills Point?
4. All 4 of my children. Well,
Peyton
my children plus. Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, isn't it true that after you delivered the children to Mrs. Latrell that night, she called you to confront you about something that Peyton had told her?
Not that I can recall.
Okay.
Like I said, those are the last text messages I had from her until would have been the 18th, and I would have to been more prepared to present.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm asking you, sir, about communications from Mrs. Latrell to you the night of February the 8th, whether they were by text, phone call, or any other way.
You have the date wrong, sir. It would have been February the 6th would have been the last time I talked to Ms. Latrell before this incident.
Good. And before February the 19th.
Correct.
Okay. So then let's call it February the 6th. Did Ms. Latrell call you back after you brought your children home that night on February the 6th to challenge you about something Peyton said that you did in the car?
Again, no, sir.
Okay. All right. Now let's turn our attention finally to this incident on February the 19th. Your testimony is that you never got out of the truck, right?
Correct. As I stated, I'm sorry.
Sure.
As I stated to you in our conference room, I have running boards on my truck. I had one foot on my running board, the other foot still inside of my cab on my brake, and after that's what I stated to you at that time.
Okay, yeah, and let's just be clear here for this record. Your description of what happened is Mr. Crowe came outside the house when you pulled up to pick up your children for your regularly scheduled visitation.
Correct.
And your testimony is that he reached into the truck through the open window or through the open door?
No, the door. He opened my door. When he came to my truck, he opened my door and said we had to talk about something. And I said, go ahead, man. He said, what is this shit that you're saying to Brittany? And then I simply stated to him the same thing I stated to Miss Latrell. Do you think it's a good idea y'all are having another kid? I think my kids have been burning enough. And then he proceeded to curse at me, tell me, don't you worry about what the F goes on around here. I'm tired of you threatening me. And again, as I told you before, I turned my head, I turned my body to reach and grab my cell phone off of my center console. And that's when Mr. Crowe grabbed me around my throat and pushed me up against my center console and proceeded to choke me and didn't stop until Mackenzie Litrell came outside.
And did Mackenzie say something that intervened?
Yes, she was yelling, stop crying, trying to call her mother on the phone.
Okay. Okay. Oh, so is it your testimony that she did call Miss Latrell that day?
Well, she attempted to. Yes, sir. It took my fiance calling her work to get her on the phone.
I see. So just to be clear, the last time that you had any communication with Miss Latrell prior to February the 19th was on February the 6th. Is that right?
Well, no, as I said, the February the 18th, but it was struck from the record. February the 18th, she called me and we had a telephone conversation, which I said it was recorded.
What did? I'm just asking.
Okay, so February the 18th is when I spoke with her on the phone. I'm sorry. Okay. Go ahead.
That's all right. That's all right. So I'm going to ask you about whether you texted Mrs. Latrell something about this pregnancy now, okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
So I'm reading and I'm asking you if you agree that you texted this, okay? You are pregnant. WTF is wrong with you, ma'am. That's why you're acting this way towards me. Don't expect me to pick up slack in your home department, especially when you decide to have another kid. Let him help you. He put a baby in you. It's his problem too. Is that your text?
Correct.
Yes, or no?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, after this incident happened on February the 19th. Did you call Mrs. Litrell, your ex-wife, Brittany?
After the incident on the 19th?
Yes.
Yes, I did call her and tell her we needed to talk about something, that I didn't expect him to be there when I dropped my kids off. I didn't want to be around.
Yes, fine. You called her, correct?
Correct.
Isn't it true, sir, that you told Miss Latrell that you would drop the charges that you intended to file against Mr. Crowe if she agreed to give up custody of the two children?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Did you record that call?
I believe I do have that call recorded. Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you have it with you?
No, it's on this telephone, as I stated to the judge.
Okay.
But as I stated, I do record every conversation I have with Ms. Latrell, because I have to.
Yeah, you did say that. Now, just to close here, sir, who is Brittany Crowe?
I believe that's his ex. Yes, that's his ex.
That's Mr. Crowe's ex-wife, right?
Correct.
And just
I
to
only
be
know
clear,
that
when you say,
Okay.
if I may, just to be clear, you're describing Brittany Crowe as Daniel Crowe's ex-wife. You don't know that they haven't divorced, it's finalized yet, correct?
Well, per hearsay, as you call it, Brittany has said they.
I'm not
Brittany
asking you
Migrant.
that, sir. I'm asking you if you know whether they're divorced.
No, I don't know if it's final now. No, sir. I don't know.
Thank you. All right. So when's the last time, if ever, that you talked with or communicated in any way with Brittany Crowe?
I don't communicate with Miss Crowe at all.
Have you ever communicated with her at all? Yes or no?
No, sir.
Okay. Yeah, and lastly, I think, Mr. Latrell, you described putting cameras up at your house to protect yourself and your family. When did you do that, please?
I bought those cameras, would have been the weekend after I dropped my kids off. So that would have been, let me get my calendar here. That'd have been the weekend of the 27th of February.
So you don't have any video of this event where you destroyed the property in Miss Shackle's house?
No, sir. I believe Miss Latrell has some pictures, but other than that, there's no video.
I see. What's the basis of your suspicion that Miss Latrell has pictures?
Ariel had sent them to her, trying to get Miss Latrell to calm me down.
So you're aware that Miss Shackle emailed to Mrs. Latrell photos of the damage to Miss Shackle's house?
Correct.
Do you have any reason to believe that those photos are inaccurate?
No, I mean, they came from, as I stated, they came from Ariel.
Yeah. So you would agree that those photos that Miss Shackle sent to Miss Latrell are accurate depictions of the damage that you did to Miss Shackle's house on the night of February, February the 6th?
The 8th. It would have been the 8th when I was here by myself. Correct.
Okay. All right. Your Honor, pass the witness.
All right, Mr. Latrell, at this opportunity, you would be able to continue testifying for yourself if there's any additional evidence you want to offer or any thing that you want to say to respond to questions that were asked by Mr. Haslam.
I like I said, I didn't know we were going to be, bringing up stuff that wasn't relative to this, me being assaulted and stuff like that. So I would like to point out to the court that ever since this event, I haven't been able to speak to or see my children. They've been held away from me. Anybody can see that, the events that I don't have anything to hide. The events in October, yeah, that happened. Nothing's happened ever since then. Miss Latrell was aware of the situation. Like I told you, because she was sent pictures by Miss Shackle. And we were going through a divorce at the time, going through lawyers and everything. So, if Miss Latrell had a problem with that or felt that strongly about anything that I did that day, she would have brought it to her lawyer's attention. She would have not allowed my kids to be at my house the weekends prior to Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving. They wouldn't have been allowed at my house to the weekends prior to Christmas and all the way up until the point to where Mr. Crowe assaulted me. After Mr. Crowe assaulted me is when she ceased my contact with my children, and she has made my kids, I think that I'm the bad guy. I don't know, because I haven't spoke to my kids.
Thank you, Mr. Latrell.
Briefly,
You have additional recross? Or?
just very, very, very briefly, Judge. I'm going to wrap this up very briefly. Mr. Latrell?
Yes, sir.
If I understand your redirect of yourself, what you just said after I finished questioning you, if I understand what you're saying to the court is you don't find these events where you destroyed property in the house or you choked Mrs. Latrell, who was then your wife, you don't find them relevant. Is that right?
Not to this case, no, sir.
Okay. So, sir, isn't it true that the reason that Mrs. Latrell did not leave you earlier after 2010 is that you terrorized her and your children throughout the remainder of your marriage so that she was afraid to leave you?
That's absolutely not true.
Sir, isn't it true that the reason that Miss Shackle hasn't left you, despite the fact that you destroyed her house, she hasn't left you because you're terrorizing her with your violent, intemperate rage that is a chronic problem for you?
That's absolutely not true.
Sir, isn't it true that when you showed up at Mrs. Latrell's house on February the 19th, you were drunk and in another violent rage?
No, that's absolutely not true.
Pass the witness.
Mr. Latrell, do you offer any other evidence, any other witnesses at this time?
Other than, like I said, my evidence of me speaking with Miss Latrell on the 18th, you can clearly, if I did have that in the court, you would clearly be able to see I wasn't in a violent rage or anything like that. That's it. That's all I got, Your Honor.
Okay. If you're not calling any other witnesses or offering any other evidence, then I'm going to now allow Mr. Crowe to present any evidence to the court that he chooses. Go ahead, Mr. Haslam.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, if I'm going to request leave briefly to describe to the court where we're going. I know if I were in the court's seat, I would like to have some idea where we're going ahead of time. If the court does not find that useful, then I'll proceed to call my first witness.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, sir, at this time, I'd call the respondent, Mr. Crowe.
Well, no, I'm saying, Mr. Haslam, if you want leave to make a brief opening or kind of direction, you may do so.
Thank you. So, Your Honor, if it was not apparent from my second recross, or my recross rather, here is the overarching narrative in response to this application for protective order. It's a simple self-defense argument that will proceed this way. Mr. Crowe was acutely aware by the time that February 19th of 2021 rolled around that Mr. Latrell had a history of violence and drug abuse and just generally intemperate behavior. This is the relevance, the probative value of the testimony that Mr. Latrell offered about the October the 8th incident in 2020 and the incident on February the 6th of 2021, as well as the testimony about his strangulation of his wife in 2010. In addition, there will be some testimony about more recent drug use. The value of that testimony, Your Honor, is to establish two things. First, that when Mr. Crowe went outside to see Mr. Latrell that afternoon, when Mr. Latrell drove up in the driveway at the Latrell home in Wills Point on February the 19th, he was aware of recent intemperate behavior and threats to himself and to Mrs. Crowe and to Mrs. Latrell. He went outside to inoculate against what he had a reasonable basis to believe was a pending threat that existed because Mr. Latrell had expressed a threat that the court will hear about in his rage about the new pregnancy. Secondly, you'll also hear testimony that Mr. Latrell's description of what happened at the car that afternoon is just not true. You'll hear testimony from Mr. Crowe that Mr. Latrell got out of the car and cursed at Mr. Crowe and took an aggressive stance, bladed himself to Mr. Crowe and created a reasonable apprehension of harm to himself by Mr. Latrell. And so he grabbed him and put him back in the truck. That's where we're going. I'll offer testimony first directly from Mr. Crowe about what happened and what he had been made aware of that created this concern in his mind that was reasonable when he went outside that day. And secondly, Your Honor, you'll hear testimony from Mrs. Latrell about more specific instances of conduct by Mr. Latrell in the days and weeks prior to February the 19th that led both of the adults, Mr. Crowe and Mr. Latrell, to have a reasonable apprehension of harm such that what happened in the driveway that afternoon is justifiable. So thank you, Your Honor, for leave to make that opening. And I call at this time, Mr. Crowe.
All right, you may proceed. And Mr. Crowe, you understand you're still under oath, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, Your
All
Honor.
right. And just while I have you here, let's remember, let's try not to talk over one another. Give Mr. Haslam complete his sentence, and he's going to wait a second or two to let you know that he's finished and give you a chance to respond. And then you're going to wait a second or two, and Mr. Haslam will then ask the next question. All right. So we're not talking over one another. Go ahead, Mr.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Crowe, good morning. I want to start with the events of February the 19th, okay?
Yes, sir.
So tell Judge Martin what happened.
February 19th, Mr. Latrell was coming to pick up his children. I saw him pull up in his vehicle. I was made aware of all the threats. So I went outside in good faith to speak to this man to try to come to some peaceful conclusion of the threats. The first things out of my mouth were, "Why are you calling me and Brittany stupid idiots for this pregnancy?" Mr. Latrell proceeded to tell me that we were both effing ignorant and asked, did I think that it was the smartest thing to do? I proceeded to say it was not his business to leave my child out of it and to worry about his children. I then reverted and asked him, why has he been threatening me, and to please stop. He's been threatening me over my ongoing custody litigation. And then, of course, I was made aware of the February 7th threat, causing harm to a pregnancy, interference to a pregnancy. At that time, he proceeded to get out of his vehicle. He took the bladed stance and appeared very aggressive, said that I was going to learn who the F he was. It was at that moment where I felt enough threat that I removed him from my space, put him back into the truck, and I cautiously walked back into the home.
And you consciously did what?
Walked back into the home and waited for police to arrive.
All right, so you've heard Mr. Latrell say that he never got out of his truck, right?
Yes, sir. That's incorrect.
Let me ask you this. Could you hear Mr. Latrell's testimony this morning?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So you heard him say that he never got out of the truck, right?
Yes, sir.
You heard him say that you took the encounter to him and choked him while he was sitting in his truck. You heard him say that.
Yes, sir.
Is that true?
No, sir. That's incorrect.
Did he get out of his truck?
Yes, sir. He did.
Okay. And in as much as that seems to be really the center of gravity of this confrontation, what was said immediately prior, and by whom, immediately prior to his getting out of his truck?
That you are going to learn who the F I am.
Okay. And when you say that he took a bladed stance to you when he got out of the truck, please, in just common sense words, what do you mean? What happened?
He angled his body into a position that I felt that he could easily make a strike towards me.
Did you believe that he was getting ready to hit you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did he look angry?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you see anything else about his demeanor, his posture, his language that caused you to be concerned about your physical safety?
His chest was risen out and his fists were clenched.
Okay. All right. So after you put him back in his truck, then let's just go be very as clear as possible for Judge Martin about who did what when. Was there anything else said at that point before you walked into the house?
I yelled that you were never going to threaten me again.
Okay. Did he say anything?
That I effed up.
Okay. All right. Pass the witness, Your Honor.
Mr. Latrell, do you have questions for Mr. Crowe? And it would need to be in a question and answer format.
No, not at this time, Your Honor. I think we've heard enough.
Okay. Mr. Haslam, do you have any additional witnesses?
I do. Brittany Latrell, Your Honor.
And I do not see Ms. Latrell logged into my, well, actually, you know what? She's in the breakout room. Let me move her here. All right, Ms. Latrell, I'm going to unmute your device. Okay, Ms. Latrell.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, Ms. Latrell, I've already placed you under oath, and at this time, Mr. Haslam has called you as a witness. I need you to speak up loudly and clearly so my court reporter can take down what you're saying. Also, I need to make sure that you do not talk over Mr. Haslam. Do not respond as he's still asking his question, and he's going to extend the same courtesy to you. He's not going to ask questions while you're responding so that my court reporter can clearly take down who is saying what in today's proceeding. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
And if at any time someone says objection, then just stop testifying. The court will address the objection and direct you whether you continue testifying about that matter or not. Do you understand?
Okay. Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Haslam.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Latrell.
Good morning.
Would you please state your full name for this record?
It's Brittany Michelle Latrell.
Thank you. Now, it's a little awkward. I'm just as the court explained, I'm going to pause after you finish each thing you say because there's a little bit of a feedback and echo here this morning. So please understand that that's what's happening when I wait before I say something.
Okay.
Now, you just told us your full name. I see in several places, in several documents that I have reviewed, that your name also includes the name Garcia. Please explain that.
That is my maiden name.
Okay. All right. Now, I want to talk with you a little bit about your history with Mr. Latrell.
Okay.
When were you married to Mr. Latrell?
June 13th, 2008.
And you were divorced from Mr. Latrell when?
It was finalized December 5th of 2020.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you about your observation and experience with Mr. Latrell during the course of your marriage and since then, with respect to his temper and his capacity for violence.
Okay.
In 2010, there was an episode that resulted in a conviction of Mr. Latrell for strangulating you. Do you recall that?
I do.
This is while you were married.
Correct.
And that description is accurate. Well, let me just ask you for your description of what happened, please.
We were fighting about him talking to another female. He went to the bedroom to ignore me pretty much. I followed him. He was laying in the bed and I smacked his foot and he got up and choked me. I proceeded to pretend I was dead so he would stop because he wasn't letting go. And then he left the house and I called the police.
Okay. So he was angry.
Very. Always.
Okay. Always. Okay. Did you have to testify in that matter?
No, because me and him stayed together, I kind of ignored all attempts for the DA to, when they reached out to me, I wouldn't return their phone calls. I wouldn't talk to them.
Okay. All right. You said that he was always violent and intemperate, had an anger problem. Is that a fair characterization of your testimony?
Correct.
Did you see him in other violent encounters with other men?
I did.
How many?
One that I was with him when it happened.
And what did he do?
It was my ex-boyfriend and he went over to his house and fought him.
Okay. Now, you also, I think, and please, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you said that he was always angry. Does that mean throughout the remaining course of your marriage as well?
Correct.
What does that mean, that he was always angry?
He was always on edge about things. So walked on eggshells because I didn't want to make him mad. I also allowed him to smoke weed because that was what kept him, quote, calm for the most part. So when he didn't have that, he was a very angry person.
Okay. I want to turn your attention, please, to October the 8th of 2020. Do you recall that day?
Yeah, my daughter's birthday.
That's your daughter. What's her name?
Peyton Latrell.
How old is Peyton?
She's 7.
Okay. Why do you remember October the 8th of 2020?
because Robert came and picked my daughter Peyton up for her birthday per our agreement for him to see her on her birthday. He was actually supposed to keep her until the following day. And I received a phone call from Ariel, his girlfriend, stating that Robert was drunk and on his way back to drop Peyton off to my house after he picked her up because they were fighting.
Meaning Ariel and Mr. Latrell were
Robert.
fighting. Robert
Correct.
Latrell.
Correct.
Okay. The man that's in the courtroom today.
Correct.
Okay. Now, when Peyton got home, did you talk with her about what happened?
I did, because she was visibly upset.
Okay. Tell me, when you say she was visibly upset, describe that to me, please.
She had just a look on her face that 7-year-old who's celebrating her birthday shouldn't have. She was kind of down, and so I started asking her about what happened, and she told me everything.
Okay. Did she become emotional?
Yeah, she started crying very bad and hugged on to me really tight and told me it was the worst birthday ever.
Okay. Do you find Peyton to be trustworthy?
Yes.
Okay. What did Peyton tell you about what happened that night?
That Ariel and Robert started fighting right when Ariel got home from, I guess, work. She just said when she got home. Robert pushed Ariel and then told Peyton to get her stuff. She was going home.
Did Peyton tell you why they were arguing?
No, Ariel told me why they were arguing. Peyton didn't tell me.
Yeah, we'll come to that in a minute. So did Peyton also describe to you the events between Wills Point and Tyler, and from Tyler back to Wills Point?
Yes, she did.
What did she say?
That Daddy was drinking the whole way on his phone and swerving, and that she was scared.
Okay. Did she make clear that that was happening on the way from Wills Point to Tyler?
She actually told me on the way from Wills Point to Tyler that Daddy stopped and grabbed a bottle.
Okay.
On the way
And-
home
Yes, ma'am.
was the swerving incidents.
Okay. And did you believe her?
100%.
Okay. All right. Now, I understand that as a result of that conversation, maybe I'm wrong about that. That night you also had communication with Ariel Shackle.
Correct.
How did you communicate with her that night?
Via text message. She called me first, and then the rest of the communication was via text message.
Okay. Now, Your Honor, I don't know how the court would like to proceed here, but there is an exhibit that I would like to show this witness. It's marked as DD1, and I think that the court has that presently.
Marked as DD1?
DD1. And just to disabuse us of the mystery, it's the shorthand for drunk driving. That was relayed to the court this morning, and hopefully we have it in a way that it can be offered into evidence and this witness can testify from it.
I believe the only thing that my coordinator has provided to me with regards to exhibits, proposed exhibits for this hearing, are PO hearing exhibits 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so are you indicating?
This is correct. This is exactly correct. So DD1 is going to be a subset in Exhibits 1. It's going to be 14 pages, and they are all designated as DD1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up through 14.
Okay. Give me just one moment and let me see if I can find it here. And is DD1 a text message?
It is. All of them are text, Your Honor.
Okay. So let me share my screen. Unless you have it. Do you have it available, Mr. Haslam?
I do have it available, but the witness does not have it in front of her.
All right. And Ms. Latrell, can you see this on your screen?
Yes, I see it now.
And it's marked DD1. All right, go ahead, Mr. Haslam.
Thank you. Ms. Latrell, have you seen these exhibits DD1 through DD14?
Yes, sir.
And how did I get them?
I sent them to Daniel, who then sent them to you.
Have you reviewed them to confirm that they are all 14 pages, the text messages that you received from Ms. Shekel?
Yes.
In fact, all 14 of these are text messages to you from Ariel Shekel on the night of October the 8th, 2020. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. We are, the court has us in the perfect place here on the first of those text messages, DD1. And I just want to point out to you that that is designated up at the top with the name Ariel. Just to be clear, that's Ariel Shekel, who you know to be the significant other at the time on October the 8th, Mr. Latrell's significant other.
Yes, sir.
In fact, that's where Mr. Latrell was living at the time, and that's where he took Peyton that night, the night of her birthday.
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's start with these text messages, ma'am. And I'm just going to give you, well, I'm going to ask you some specific questions, and let's proceed that way.
And Mr. Haslam, are you offering these exhibits?
So, Your Honor, I am, and I think I've laid the foundation for it that's adequate. I was going to really be belt and suspenders, but at this time, I will go ahead and offer them as DD1 through 14, respondents DD1 through 14.
All right. And Mr. Latrell, do you have any objections to these exhibits marked DD1 through DD14? And have you been provided a copy of these? And Mr. Latrell, you're on mute.
No, I haven't been provided with any of those. I just see what's on my screen. But I wanted to know if any of those text messages have her phone number listed on there. You know, anybody can put Ariel on a phone and type text messages.
So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through here and give you a chance to review them.
And they're quite small, Your Honor. They're pretty hard to see unless they're from whoever's sending or.
And this is as large as I can make it.
Okay, and like I said, and as I stated, you know, anybody can put a name on. No, I recognize the pictures, but I don't recognize. As I've said, I know they're from the pictures she got sent were from Ariel. I don't know.
I understand. I just want you to review them. I'm just giving you a chance to look at them, and then I'll listen to your objection if you have any. And this one's upside down. I can't do anything about that.
Okay.
Okay, so I've given you a chance to review DD1 through DD14 briefly. Do you have any legal objections?
Nothing other than that anybody can put a name on top of a phone number and say it's from them. I mean, I'd prefer they'd have a cell phone number on the top so we knew who they were coming from for sure. But other than that, no, sir.
Okay, so the court's going to admit respondents exhibits DD1 through DD14.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Latrell, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I want to ask you about this phone number real quickly. Ariel Shackle, had you communicated with Ms. Shackle by text and or phone before October the 8th of 2020?
Yes, sir, I have.
And so when you received these text messages on the night of October the 8th of 2020, purporting to be from Ms. Shackle, did they come from a phone number that you had previously identified to be Ms. Shackle's phone number?
Yes, sir.
Further, did you speak with Ms. Shackle by phone that night of October the 8th, 2020 during the transmission of these texts?
Yes, sir.
The phone conversation that you had with Ms. Shackle that night consistent with the representations made in these text messages?
Yes, sir.
All right. In general, please just describe in your own words what Ms. Shackle was telling you had happened the night of October the 8th when Mr. Latrell brought Peyton to her home on the night of her birthday.
So when she called me, she told me that Robert had gotten upset because she got home and didn't tell Peyton happy birthday right when she walked in. So then they proceeded to fight and argue about it.
Okay. And did she tell you what happened then?
He grabbed Peyton and her stuff and left. And that's when she called me to tell me Robert was on his way home drunk with Peyton.
Okay. So I think it's clear from your testimony, but I want to be quite clear that Ms. Shackle was describing to you her visual observations and impressions, it appeared to you, as they were then occurring.
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to turn your attention to a specific page here. Please bear with me 1 second, Your Honor.
Okay.
All right. If you would please, Your Honor, can we see DD2? Now, up at the top of that exhibit, Ms. Latrell, you will see some text messages that are smaller in font and smaller in bubble than the others. Do you see those?
Yes, sir.
Do you have an understanding of what those are?
Those are screenshots she took of Robert texting her phone, Ariel's phone.
Okay. So Your Honor, these have been admitted. I understand that this proceeding is being published real-time live. I'm not particularly inclined to read this language into the record since it's going to be made a part of the record. But I would just respectfully request the court, if it can read that language in those texts that have been described as coming from Mr. Latrell to Ariel, before I move along.
The court, upon viewing DD2, it is legible to the court, and the court can read it.
Okay. Ms. Latrell, moving on here, the next large bubble that starts with "I can't deal." Just to be clear, that is whose text? Yours or Mrs. Shekels?
That's Ariel's text.
Okay. I am going to ask you to read that.
Can you scroll up? Okay, never mind. It says, I can't deal with this shit for real. He has said he's killing my kids and we better not be home when he gets there.
I'd like to move, Your Honor, please, to the next page, DD3. There we go, Your Honor. At the top of DD3, what you see now on your screen, Ms. Latrell, has been designated as DD3. And to be clear, once again, that first bubble is a text from who to who?
That's from Ariel to me as well.
And you can tell that because of the color of the bubbles, right?
Yeah, but on my screen, it's just black and white. But also
Okay.
her text will be on the left-hand side. Mine will be on the right on these iPhones.
Have you reviewed these texts prior to this proceeding?
Yes, sir. They're still on my phone.
And are you confident about your understanding of whose texts are whose?
Yes, sir.
All right, please read the first bubble.
The dude is going to kill me. Another night of sleeping in my fucking car.
Okay. And in the next two, please, and we'll move on.
He just texted me and said, oh, so you called Britt, and then said, signed, sealed, delivered. And then it needs to scroll up just a little for me to see the other one.
No, the next one I want you to read is right after what you read.
Right. The dude is going to kill me. Another night of sleeping in my fucking car. Continue going.
Okay.
Okay.
No, that's sufficient there. And let's turn to DD4, please. Ma'am, do you see that photographic image in that text?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And just to be clear, what is your understanding of that image?
Ariel had sent that picture to me showing me that Robert was breaking things in her home.
Okay. All right. And DD5, please, Your Honor. At the top, you see that there's a text. Who is that text from, the first one?
That's me texting Ariel.
And you're asking her if Mr. Latrell is presently there with her now.
Right.
And what's her response?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Your Honor, same concern about the text at the bottom of DD5. I'm not going to read those or have the witness read those into the record, just because the language is offensive, but it's evident, I think, to me now, and I'm going to conclude going forward that those small font, small bubble texts are legible by the court.
They are.
Your Honor, if we could please turn to DD7. Okay. Ms. Latrell, I want to turn your attention to the text that starts with "oh no." And just to be clear again, that's a text from who to who?
That's from Ariel to me.
Please read it.
Oh no, he got to my house at like 9:10. My doorbell camera caught him. Then he unplugged the inside cameras and started smashing shit.
Your Honor, please, if we may turn to the bottom of DD8. There we go. Ms. Latrell, do you see those small bubble, small font texts that you testified are screenshots that are text from Mr. Latrell to Ariel that she screenshotted into this text thread?
Yes.
Is that your understanding of what those texts are at the bottom of page DD8?
Yes, sir.
Please read them beginning with "don't call."
Don't call trying to smooth shit over manana. Y'all, I'm fucked. I don't know what that says. The next one. And then it says promise. And only reason you is that I can't see that one. It says me to is cause you with another nigga. Have a good one, bitch. Come back here. I'm gonna knock your head off. I'm gonna give you 3 more minutes out of the kindness of my heart.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can we turn to DD9, please? Ms. Latrell, you're going to see another image there on DD9. And actually, this is unfortunately the page that is rotated. And it's probably going to be difficult for you to testify about. Can you see it and understand what's happening there?
Give me just one moment.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Latrell, the court has rotated that image. I unfortunately submitted it to the court, rotated 180, so it was hard to see. You can see it now right side up.
Yes, sir.
What is that an image of?
That is an image of a candle, I believe he threw and busted on her stove.
Okay. And to be clear, we're using pronouns, and in a courtroom, those are our worst enemies. So when you say he and her, if you would use specific names.
Robert broke a candle on Ariel's stove.
Okay. So next page, please, Your Honor.
That DD10 that you want?
Yes, sir. Ma'am, these images, there are 2 there. Those images, are those images that Ariel Shackle sent to you on the night of October the 8th?
Yes, sir.
And what are they images of?
more stuff that he's breaking, and I believe the bottom picture is her laptop that he shattered.
Your Honor, DD 11, please. At the bottom of that DD 11, Ms. Latrell, there is a text message from, according to the convention that you described to us, that's a text from Mrs. Shackle to you, beginning with "he has smashed." Do you see that?
Yes, I do. I have a partial vision of it.
Can you just read the first sentence of that bubble?
He has smashed everything. The one TV he has not smashed, he just did.
Your Honor, DD 12, please. Ma'am, you see an image on DD 12. What is that image of?
It is a TV at Ariel's house that Robert broke.
Okay. Underneath that image, there appears to be more text from Mr. Latrell to Errol Shekel. Is that correct?
Correct.
Please read those into the record.
Have to scroll down. There we go. I believe because of how the iPhones are, Robert wrote, "You want to keep on?" Ariel says no. He wrote, "WTF you at?" Or I would say, "Where the fuck you at?" And then, "Or am I going to see your bitch ass?" BD is short for baby daddy.
Short for what?
Baby daddy, which is Ariel's kid's father.
Okay. DD 13, please, Your Honor. Okay, so these are very important because they put in context where we are and what's happening. The first three bubbles, one of them appears to be from Ariel to you, and the next two appear to be in response from you to her. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Please read the one from Ariel to you and stop reading.
He keeps saying I treated Peyton like shit. I said call Peyton, and he just keeps smashing shit.
Okay. Now, that's the end of her text. Then you respond to her with two bubbles, right?
Correct.
Please read them.
Peyton didn't say shit. She keeps talking about daddy drinking with me in the car, and he could have crashed. She said he was texting and swerved a bunch.
Okay. Your Honor, that's all that I have with respect to DD 1 through 14. There are also there's a two-page exhibit that is in the larger PDF designated Exhibits 1 that I'd like to put on the screen now. They are P1, P2.
believe this is P1.
In Exhibits 1, there should be P1 and P2.
Yes, I'm showing right here, Exhibit 1,
Okay.
P1.
Okay. Yeah, what I see, Your Honor, on my screen is I don't see P1 or P2 yet. I just see the larger PDF that they are a subset of Exhibits 1. We need to open Exhibits 1 and we'll find P1 and P2 in that.
It's showing on my screen. It's more text messages, correct?
It's not showing.
Yes, sir. It's just 2 pages. I'm so sorry about the cumbersomeness of this. Your Honor, there we go. There we go, Your Honor. Thank you so much. Ma'am, what you see now on the screen is a 2-page exhibit. It's designated P1 and P2. What we are looking at now is P1. And I'm going to ask you, please, if you recall this, if you know what this is.
Yes, sir. I recall this conversation.
What is it?
It's between me and Robert.
That's Robert Latrell, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So again, there are 2 colors of bubbles here. There are darker bubbles and lighter bubbles. Who are the darker bubbles?
That would be Robert.
And who are the lighter bubbles?
Myself.
Okay. When did this text thread happen?
I believe he was bringing the kids home, so February the 7th.
And Mr. Haslam, I believe you're, hang on just one moment. I believe you are muted. If you'll unmute yourself, Mr. Haslam.
Okay, there, I should be unmuted. I'm sorry about that. Ms. Latrell, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
When did this text happen?
On February the 7th.
What year?
2021.
All right. This 2-page text between Mr. Latrell and yourself, you know this to be a text from Mr. Latrell. How?
I mean, it's how we communicate. I have his number in my phone. We talk on that number all the time for years.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I'd move for the admission of P1 and P2.
Mr. Latrell, do you have any legal objections to the admission of P1 and P2? And you're on mute. You'll have to unmute as well.
You said omission, Your Honor?
Do you have any objection to the admission? That means admitting them into evidence.
No, I do not.
All right. P1, I guess this is respondents exhibits P1 and P2 are admitted into evidence. Go ahead, Mr. Haslam.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Latrell, I'm just going to ask you to read these into the record. And if at each handoff from one party to the next, if you will just identify who is saying what. If you'll start with the first bubble, tell us who it is. Tell us what that person's writing.
This is Robert texting me. Is Daniel at your house? I can meet him there and gladly discuss his pissed offense.
And next.
I wrote him back and said, you don't want that. Go ahead and start shit at my house. I dare you. I'll let him know to meet you outside. Send the kids inside the house when you get there. Get there then. And then
Okay.
Robert texted me back. Okay, I would love to speak to him about his problem. Robert then texted again, 10 minutes out.
Okay, and we can go to P2 now, please. And please tell us, start again, tell us who's the author of the bubble at the top of P2.
This is Robert texting me.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
This is Robert texting me.
Okay, if you will just please proceed as before.
Robert texts me, Kay, let me know. I'll have them get their shit ready. He then writes, you are pregnant. What the fuck is wrong with you, ma'am? That's why you're acting this way towards me. Don't expect me to pick up slack in your home department, especially when you decide to have another kid. Let him help you. He put a baby in you. Yeah, it's his problem too.
Okay,
And I wrote
the
back,
last.
you don't know my business nor need to.
Okay. Now, this P1 and P2, they were sent on February the 6th, is that right?
No, this was February the 7th.
Okay. Now, there was an event on February the 6th or 7th that was another startling event, if I recall. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Please tell Judge Martin, and you might need to speak slowly. We're getting a bit of a feedback problem.
It froze up, Your Honor.
It's
I'm back.
real
Your Honor.
laggy. I don't know if y'all can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, can you explain what you wanted me to say again? Because I couldn't hear you. It was cutting out really bad.
It's okay. It's I'm sure it's my bad here. February the 7th, what happened?
Like from start to finish, like you want to know the whole episode of where?
Yes, I think it's important.
Okay, long story short, Robert had the kids in his possession. It was his weekend. Daniel was out in Tyler with his kids at the zoo and offered to pick the kids up from Robert since Robert lived in Tyler. Robert agreed. Then I guess in between that time, he found out I was pregnant. That's when those text messages come into play where he was calling me an idiot. I then texted him and said, you pissed Daniel off now. You need to drop the kids off in Wills Point yourself. And that's when he started saying, I'll gladly discuss his pissed off state, or pretty much wanted to talk to Daniel about him being pissed off about him calling us an idiot. He drops the kids off. I get home from work because I'm at work at the time, and I sit down and talk to my daughter, Peyton, who then proceeds to tell me that she heard Daddy on the phone with his girlfriend telling her that she's pretty much going to kick my ass and hopefully the baby survives through that. And for Peyton to prepare for my butt being whooped.
So I appreciate that it's difficult to talk about, but at least for me, I'm talking very slowly or trying to, because I don't think the technology can.
I think we lost Mr. Haslam again, but.
Yeah, I'm not hearing anything.
And Ms. Latrell, I heard your
I'm back
testimony clearly, so I think Mr. Haslam's the only one.
in.
Okay.
Did she? All right. Okay. So if the court heard that testimony, then I won't ask her to slow it down and repeat it. So when Peyton told you about this conversation that she overheard Mr. Latrell having with his girlfriend about kicking your butt and hoping that the baby survived, when you're having this conversation with Peyton, how long is it after she got home that night? How long is it after Mr. Latrell dropped her off that you're having that conversation with her?
About 2 hours.
Okay. And did you take any steps in response to learning that?
Yes, I did.
Tell Judge Martin what you did.
I text Robert and I text Ariel about what Peyton said.
Okay. And what did you say to them?
Pretty much the kids aren't going to your house anymore. I have them on recording stating what you said about the baby. I sent them a long text, both of them, and then I blocked both their numbers because I didn't want a response.
Okay. Did you take that threat seriously?
I did.
Okay. Why did you believe 7-year-old Peyton when she told you this?
Because I don't believe my 7-year-old would make up something like that. She doesn't come up with stories like that. She doesn't lie to me. If she does, it's something tiny. She doesn't lie to me like that. She doesn't make up stories. So I took her and believed her because of mine and Mr. Latrell's past.
Okay. Did you relay your concern about that threat to Mr. Crowe?
I did tell him.
How quickly did you make him aware of that?
Right after I talked to Peyton.
Okay. So just to be clear, you related to Mr. Crowe the threat that Peyton had described to you and that you immediately challenged Mr. Latrell and his girlfriend about. You related that threat to him, right?
Correct.
Okay. With respect to the October the 8th incident and the drunk driving and so forth, did you relay what Peyton said to you about that to Mr. Crowe?
I did.
Did you relay to Mr. Crowe what happened in the domestic strangulation event back in 2010?
I did.
And just to be clear, you related all of this to him before February the 19th.
Correct.
You also testified earlier, Ms. Latrell, about having experienced ongoing anger and abuse issues with Mr. Latrell throughout the duration of your marriage. Is that an accurate characterization of your testimony?
Yes, sir.
Did you relay the fears that you had about that experience to Mr. Crowe before February the 19th?
I did.
Okay. Beyond those events that we testified specifically about, I want to back away from granular detail and specific instances to more general behavior. During the course of your relationship with Mr. Crowe, did Mr. Latrell ever threaten interference in Mr. Crowe's divorce matter?
Several times.
What did he say specifically? And take your time so that the judge can hear them all, please.
Well, Mr. Latrell knew about Daniel's ongoing custody, his ongoing divorce, because he had the same lawyer as Daniel's ex. And I've spoke to him about it because I was trying to relay how we didn't like that lawyer. So I discussed Daniel's case with him when we were getting along for the brief moment. So he pretty much used all of that against him. Anytime I would say, like, if my kids came home and said something, I would say, "You're not seeing my kids again." He would then reply, "I'm going to tell Miss Cluck this," or "I'm going to do this," pretty much just trying to make it to where Daniel wouldn't have his kids, where Daniel's divorce would go a different way than what it needed to go.
All right. And you relayed these exchanges that you had with Mr. Latrell to Mr. Crowe?
Yes, I did.
Let me ask you about your experience with Mr. Crowe. How long have you known him?
For a year. One year.
I'm sorry. Okay. Have you ever observed Mr. Crowe to behave in a violent or abusive way? Ever?
Never. Not one time.
Pass the witness.
Mr. Latrell, do you have any questions of Ms. Latrell?
Real quick, Your Honor, is after this is all said and done, or is there any way that I can submit evidence? Because I do have some things on his violent tendencies with Brittany.
Any evidence would need to be offered at this time during the hearing.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I do have some questions for Ms. Latrell.
Go ahead.
Ms. Latrell, was there ever an incident outside of Mr. Crowe's camper where you brought some Happy Meals to his apartment or to his camper and y'all had an issue where he pushed you off of the steps?
He's never put his hands on me.
Okay. Did you state to Mackenzie Latrell that you had told Daniel not to do that in front of the kids or where the kids could see while he was in jail?
Not to do what? Be specific.
Okay. Did you state to Mackenzie that you told Daniel not to fight me in front of the kids?
He's never put his hands on me, so I don't know what you're talking about.
That's not, Your Honor. I'm simply asking, did she state to my daughter Mackenzie?
No, I did not.
Okay. About here, I got one more. Did y'all ever have a violent encounter over a sexual act that he wanted performed on him in Galveston, and you cried and called Mr. Latrell?
No.
That's it, Your Honor.
Mr. Haslam, any additional questions for Ms. Latrell?
No, Your Honor. Rest and close.
Okay. And I understand, Mr. Latrell, that you have additional evidence that you wanted to offer, but this would be the time.
I understand that. It didn't, when I got my packet, I did this all myself. When I got my packet, it didn't say anything about, submitting evidence or anything. So if I need to refile, I will go ahead and refile and print all my stuff out, just as Mr. Haslam did. And because I have some refuting evidence in my phone to refute some of the claims that she's made.
Well, at this time, and you can make that decision if you want, but at this point in time, the court has heard the evidence that you've presented today through your testimony, and that has also received the testimony of Daniel Crowe and Brittany Latrell. The court can proceed with listening to closing arguments from both you and Mr. Haslam, and the court can issue a ruling on this today, or you can request it to non-suit at this time, I believe. It's up to you if you want to refile and do it that way.
Is that what non-suit mean? Is that what you mean by non-suit?
Non-suit means you would dismiss the action today.
Okay. Yeah, no, I would like to go ahead and get a ruling on it.
Okay, so let's go ahead, and we've got about 10 minutes. I give each one about 5 minutes. I want to hear closing arguments as to why you believe, Mr. Latrell, that the application for protective order for the protection of Peyton and Braden should be granted. Go ahead.
Okay, the reason why I want this protection order for my children, and what from my understanding, when I got this letter, they had marked out. Oh, I'm sorry, it marked out after the children. Okay. For my children, I haven't been able to speak to him nor see him. I know I know Mr. Crowe has per Miss Latrell, a no corporal punishment issue for his own children. And partly because he's got this charge is because of one of my kids testified or told the police what happened. And simply, Your Honor, I'm asking for protection from my children, from me, just so we can.
Facts, not evidence.
I'll sustain the objection. So, Mr. Latrell, your closing argument will need to focus on the evidence that you brought to the court today through your testimony or Ms. Latrell's testimony or Mr. Crowe. You can't offer any arguments about evidence that has not been brought to me today. So to this point, I haven't heard anything about Peyton's testimony regarding the actions of that day or
Okay, yes, sir.
Said to the
I
police
completely
officer.
understand. I think I was kind of confused on what we were here for today. I think I was kind of flip-flopped. I thought we were here about me, not the kids. I completely understand. If what I'm trying to understand is if that was said in my car when I was taking all my kids home, why was Peyton the only one to say something about it? I've got a 16, a 15, and a 13-year-old that are big enough to say anything about it. Other than that, Your Honor, I just, I don't know what we can do to my kids. So that's why I'm asking you for a protective order at this time. I haven't been able to see or speak to them, so I don't know if they're okay even.
So in your application for protective order, you're only asking the court to issue a protective order with regards to Peyton and Braden, not for yourself.
No, I did. Yes, sir, Your Honor. That's why I thought you had said for my kids when you just had spoke. You said something for Peyton and Braden. But yes, I am seeking a protection order for myself based on the fact that, there's a lot of I haven't never spoke to the man. And for him to be able to put his hands on me, as I told you before, I've got to pick my kids up from that address. I've got to go to that address. And I don't know what he's capable of at this point. Other than the things they pointed out for me that are old and that should have been addressed, that if there were an issue at the time, I have nothing else, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Latrell. Mr. Haslam.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, I am, with respect to kind of jurisdictional matters and procedural posture that Mr. Latrell raises, I think I probably want to most promptly respond to those before I reach the merits of the protective order. I am laboring under the impression that the prayer for relief with respect to the children was denied by the court when it was presented ex parte in the first instance, and that we are therefore before the court now only with respect to the prayer for relief vis-a-vis Mr. Latrell. I have that incorrect?
That's not my understanding. I believe that the temporary ex parte protective order was denied until the hearing could be held. So today, what he's pled is he is the applicant, and then he's also in his application asked for protection of Peyton and Braden being children under the age of 18. So
Your Honor, that's what I've got the same. Whenever I was sent this letter for the temporary ex parte, it had my name crossed out. And it shows that respondent will, the court finds that that I failed to provide any sufficient evidence to the court that there is clear and present danger the respondent will commit acts of family violence against, and it has the applicant crossed out. but it doesn't have the children crossed out. So that's why I'm in the same boat as Mr. Haslam. I thought we were just here about me, so that's why I didn't really say anything about my children.
Let me take a moment to review that, but that was just on temporary grounds.
Okay.
Give me just a moment. Let me pull up your case. So as the court is reviewing the order denying applicant's request for temporary ex parte protective order, so the court denied the relief requested under a temporary basis.
Okay. I get what you're saying. I
So
completely understand.
The temporary order was not issued. However, you have pled for protection for you and the children under the final protective order, and that's what the court is considering today.
Okay.
So does that answer your question?
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right. So then with that issue resolved, the first observation I would respectfully make, Your Honor, is a resort to the Penal Code Section 9, Article 9.31, which explains to us what self-defense is. And while I know the court has that probably etched on the inside of its eyelids, I think for the record, I would like to just simply read that the rule is, except as provided in subsection B, a person is justified in using force against another when and to the degree the actor reasonably believes the force is immediately necessary to protect the actor against the other's use or attempted use of unlawful force. That is the gravamen of Mr. Crowe's defense here. I will, before I move on from this statute, I'm going to observe that the remainder of that statute goes on to tell us the circumstances under which a presumption of reasonable conduct exists, the stand your ground law and so forth. That's not where we are. None of those exceptions exist here. We are urging a self-defense defense, a justification defense under the first sentence of 9.31A. That is specifically that Mr. Crowe was justified in using the force that he used against Mr. Latrell in his driveway on February the 21st, or excuse me, February the 19th, when Mr. Latrell got out of his car and said, "You're getting ready to find out who the fuck I am," and bladed himself, clenched his fist, and appeared to be prepared to strike a blow. Now, with that said, my take on these events, Your Honor, is respectfully this. There's two questions that I think the court is probably considering. First, why did Mr. Crowe go outside of the house on February the 19th? And secondly, why did he feel the need to defend himself? With respect to the first question, there's been testimony unrebutted that Mr. Crowe had been made aware of a number of threats that Mr. Latrell had made both to Mrs. Crowe and to children, and he had heard from Mrs. Crowe evidence, her firsthand observations about his ability and willingness to indulge his dispensation for intemperate, angry, violent behavior over a course of years. The most recent of which would have been October the 8th of 2020, when we have unrebutted photos in the record of Mr. Latrell just coming unhinged, sheerly, flatly, simply, violently unhinged, and threatening to kill children in his cut and pasted text into that thread on October the 8th. Further, on February the 6th, we got unrebutted testimony of a child who was clearly subjected to the abusive conduct of hearing her father threaten to have her mother's butt kicked. So in the wake of those kind of long-standing concerns about Mr. Latrell's ability and willingness to indulge in that kind of behavior, and more recent evidence of that, I would respectfully urge the court that it was reasonable for Mr. Crowe to come outside of the house and stop Mr. Latrell before he came into the house and delivered on what he had been threatening to do. With respect to the second element of, I think, what is probably the question that the court is considering is whether it was reasonable for Mr. Crowe to use force. We don't have any other witnesses to what happened that day except Mr. Latrell and Mr. Crowe. We have Mr. Latrell with his criminal history and his long-standing dispensation for intemperate behavior, telling the court that he stayed in his truck and that Mr. Crowe, who is a licensed firefighter, has no criminal history. At least the record is certainly void of any testimony about that or any evidence. And who Ms. Latrell testified she has been with him for a year and has never observed anything like what Mr. Latrell has suggested of Mr. Crowe or what Mr. Latrell has actually indulged in. We've got the word of those two men about what happened in that driveway that day, and that's it. So in the best resolution of this, we've got a draw. But I respectfully urge the court to consider that if it considers the context of what happened on February the 19th, vis-a-vis this chain of text messages that involve threats and actual conduct and images of rage, the likelihood is that Mr. Crowe's characterization of events is the honest one and the accurate one. And if it is, then a self-defense defense, a justification defense is in order here. Now, I understand that the penal code and 9.31, those are typically arguments that are going to be raised in the context of a criminal adjudication. Nonetheless, I think that they're at least informative here for the court to kind of see what happened here through the prism of that kind of legal analysis. Mr. Crowe was justified in backing Mr. Latrell off and putting him in his truck. He immediately walked away and it was over. That is all.
Thank you, Mr. Haslam. Mr. Latrell, any final word? You're on mute.
Yes, Your Honor. I believe, the statement Mr. Haslam made about him being a firefighter and a paramedic, that is true to my knowledge. Even the better, him of all people should know what happens when you put your hands around somebody's neck. I didn't invite him outside that day to come fight me. I didn't invite him to even have a chat that day. I invited him to have a talk with me on the 6th or on the 7th of February. I had no understanding that he was going to come outside and even talk to me that day. But what I do want to say is him, as all people of a firefighter, should know what happens when you put your hand around somebody's neck. And that's all I have, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Latrell. All right. The court's going to take all of the testimony under advisement. The court's going to review the justification argument raised by Mr. Crowe. The court will issue a written ruling on this case before noon tomorrow. And I'll have that communicated to each one of you by electronic mail. So by noon tomorrow, I'll have an order reflecting the ruling of my court.
Do you have my email, Your Honor? Because as Mr. Haslam stated, I don't believe y'all have my email on file there.
Have you been communicating with my coordinator?